Much. Mr. Johns, good to see you. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. And I do want to thank Mr. Bruyea and Ms. Brill Edwards for your service to Canada, and as well for sharing your heartbreaking story. It's painful to hear it, and just very sorry to hear what you've been through. And certainly I want to highlight and thank you for your courage, and all of you that are here today testifying to pursue justice, not just for what your experience has been, but for those that are in the public service and for the future of our country. I thank you. Mr. Bruyea, could you maybe explain why you recommend that serving CAF members collecting VAC benefits should be covered under this act, and maybe just elaborate a bit more on what you started with in your testimony?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Johns. Serving CAF members are also entitled to collect Veterans Affairs benefits. The issue being is that the internal review process that CAF has in place has a Chief of Review Services. They report incidents of wrongdoing up the chain of command. It's a very hierarchical structure, more so than the public service. The problem would be is if the CAF member wants to report something to deal with Veterans Affairs, is that there's no authority for CAF to deal with issues concerning Veterans Affairs. And nor would they be treated very sincerely given the stigma to which disability is viewed within the Canadian Forces. So I think I think it's important that veterans serving members be able to separate their personal lives, where they suffer disabilities, from their professional lives, where they may witness wrongdoing within the operations of the CAF itself. I hope that answers the question.
It sure does. That's great. Now, also in your opening remarks, you stated that the PSDPA is a highly discriminatory act that's designed to fail. Can you maybe explain a bit more why you say this?
Yeah, I provided an anecdote previously. One of the things is that the PSDPA doesn't seem to understand the whole nature of culture within an organization, and I would put it towards members of their various parties in this committee: is how willing would you be to step outside the party to criticize something that's occurring within the party? And the loyalty within the public service, I would say, is even more so than that, in that the public servants, for the most part, really take to heart what their job is, and yet the PSDPA uses words such as good faith and the definitions of many other what I call weasel words that are open to interpretation, and the interpretation is controlled by the government. And so in a sense, this is a really disabling feature, that so much of the interpretation of the legislation is not in the power of the courts, and it's definitely not in power of the whistleblower. It is in an adversarial system that views them not in good faith. And I think in that sense that we've got a cultural misunderstanding about how difficult it is to be a whistleblower, and to consider, removing good faith from the clause and replacing it with another burden of proof. I would say that, enough has been leveled against the whistleblowers. I think that we should just remove the word good faith and not try to replace it with anything else.
What other additions would you like to see to the act, and did you have any other comments that you haven't had a chance to share with the committee?
Super. So what I see with the act is that it's really important to see this as a stepping stone for going forward. It's not perfect, but you know what? Nothing ever passed in Parliament is perfect. We work on a system of evolutionary change. There's hardly ever a revolution in Canada in the way that things happen. So you know what? It has to start somewhere. And when we're dealing with culture within a closed system, and the public service has a very closed system, but more so I would counterpose it or juxtapose it against the military very closed system. That culture has been almost impossible to change with respect to discrimination, sexual harassment, but it never stopped Parliament from stepping in and saying, hey, we're going to start with holding people accountable first and wait for cultural change later. And this is what C290 does, and I'd like to see that pursued.